For the first time this season, the Cleveland Cavaliers have lost 3 straight games, Spence. We said it was possible last night on our post-game conversation. It came to fruition. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. Maybe it was a bad omen. I don't know. But the Cavs fall once again tonight in a back-to-back on the West Coast to the Kings, 123-119. Another game where, Spence, it felt very much like the Cavaliers were getting somebody's best shot, in the same way Kawhi Leonard sort of took over last night. DeMar DeRozan did the same tonight, shooting 52% from the floor, 27 points, and he had a great supporting cast as well. There's certainly some different things we want to get into here, but Evan Mobley was brilliant for the Cavaliers. I think that's probably a good starting place on their side of things. But I'm sure the comment section tonight is going to be filled with a lot of people who feel like the sky is falling and that things aren't really going great for the Cavs at the moment. At an important stretch of the season, because they are trying to hold on to that lead in the Eastern Conference, and they don't want to see them slumping at this time of year. We'll do our best to talk you off the ledge, but I understand where a 3-game losing streak at this juncture can come off as alarming. I get it.
Yeah, especially because the Kings do not have the offensive weapons. At least this version of the Kings does not have the offensive weapons that the Clippers did, right? Like, they did not have Zach LaVine tonight. They did not have Domantas Sabonis in this lineup. So you were thinking, who is going to really be the one to score other than DeMar DeRozan? And they really did it collectively, but Malik Monk was the one who was really attacking off the dribble and keeping them on their toes the whole game. But that's just not going to cut it. I think that this is a situation where the last couple of nights you're seeing the Cavs, they're getting beat off the dribble, and that includes their best players. Like, I watched Ty Jerome have a bunch of Olay defensive plays tonight. I saw DeAndre Hunter get beat off the dribble. I saw Evan Mobley even get beat off the dribble, even though he was brilliant tonight on the offensive end and still did some really good stuff.
We saw him get beat off the dribble last night too.
And Jared Allen was out on an island all night, which led to a lot of offensive rebounds in the third quarter. Very similar to what we saw with Ivica Zubac yesterday, Jonas Valanciunas was doing in the third quarter, because Jarrett was out trying to contest shots, and it left Max Strus in an unfavorable position trying to put a body on a guy that's like twice his size. So that, I think, probably was the biggest thing that I took away from this. Was defensively, they've just not been as good. I think that you have your bright spots. You have your Isaac Okoros. I thought that Dean Wade had a really solid game tonight on each end of the floor. But Sam Merrill pretty much got played off the floor tonight. And he's been really reliable for him, but the last couple of nights have not been his best. I think that offensively, we have a lot of things to talk about. A lot of it is missed shots, but there's also something missing there. And I think tonight you see why Darius Garland's so important. You need a table setter out there to really get things set up for you. So, we'll start off with that, and then we can get to these comments and try to, like you said, talk everyone off the ledge. Yeah. But I'm not going to, sugarcoat this one. I mean, this is not something that you want to see at this point of the season. However, if you want to play devil's advocate, first 3-game losing streaks of the season, and if they're going to do this, do it now and not in a month.
Yeah, man, I think that's a simple way to put it. Not saying it's wrong to put it that way. I just think like that's probably the best way to put it. Like, yeah, if you're going to have a losing streak like this, get out of your system now, learn from it, and be able to kind of rebound here down the stretch and then into the postseason. I wanted to throw this one comment up here real quick from Tasman Sims. He says Cavs are exhausted. That is why they should be going deeper into their bench. I do think there's something to the idea, Spence, that each of these last 2 nights, you mentioned getting beat off the dribble as a problem we've suddenly seen emerge the last couple games. I do think there's something to the idea that this team does look a little tired. I think some of the questions last night about like physicality could be attributed to that as well. And we talked about fatigue in relation to Darius Garland a little bit and why maybe his shot wasn't quite as good for a stretch there. And he kind of, I think, is rebounded at this point. Obviously didn't play tonight, but I think he was looking a little bit better the last couple games in terms of knocking down shots. But maybe, we need to extend that out to the entire team and realize, like you're just at that point of the year, as Kenny talks about, like fighting the boredom, and they're playing these games, a team that takes every night seriously. They're playing very hard. And obviously they're not playing the minutes that some other teams are, like the Knicks are in that Tom Thibodeau fashion, with the team that probably plays like the most minutes with their starting units and their certain 3-man groupings and 4-man groupings and all these different things. But like maybe a bit exhausted, and that's okay. Like that's going to happen this time of year, especially on the second end of a back-to-back like we saw tonight. But again, it's one of those things that like they have to be able to recover from that, because that's not going to get easier in the playoffs. Like that's like an extension of the season that's even longer, and those games are even more grueling than these regular season games. So they got to find a way to sort of get through that and be able to be, I don't know, maybe like a week off once they hypothetically clinch the 1 seed helps that cause, because they won't be in the play-in tournament. Like, but there is something there, I think, to the idea that there's a little bit of tiredness taking its effects, and they got to sort of navigate that.
They do. I mean, they had 16 games in March. That's not an easy thing to do, and then you obviously have to equivalent, put the travel schedule into your
West
mind
Coast
as well.
trip.
I mean, you're on the second night of a back-to-back here, but again, I just don't. They're better than that. They're more mature than that. And I don't think that they're by any means thinking that they could coast. I don't see that in them. I just see kind of a disconnectedness with just kind of their offensive flow, I guess. And I think that they were moving the ball really well in the first half against the Clippers yesterday. Tonight, they just could not make shots, but defensively, they were on their P's and Q's. In the first half tonight in Sacramento, the way that they got off to that 20-7 run, it looked like they had that kind of hunger back, and the Kings just kind of kept on hanging around. And I think that, like, I'm gonna give a lot of credit to Devin Carter. I have not watched a lot of film on that guy this year. I know he's a rookie and he's been making a little bit of noise for him, but man, when I just seeing the on-ball pressure he was putting and the ball denial, he was in Donovan Mitchell's shirt the whole night and did a great job. Keon Ellis is the one that I think that gets a lot of the love on the defensive end for Sacramento, but I think that Devin Carter was outstanding tonight, and he really showed what he's made of. I think that the Cavs just were not crisp enough on their passes, and I think they telegraphed quite a bit tonight, and a lot of that includes Donovan Mitchell. I don't see where the turnovers are individually on this box score, but I'm sure that Don had quite a few of them. I think that Jarrett Allen, you're seeing the hand injury still in effect here, just not strong enough with the ball, and on some of these things where the guys are getting their hands on it when he's in a dribble handoff situation. I think that that's something to keep an eye on. I saw a couple of moves where Jarrett tried to use one of his power dribbles and it just kind of lost the ball. Just not tight enough with the handle there. I think that there's a little bit more of that part of the execution, more of like, oh, they're just trying to coast by. Like, I don't think that they have taken any team lightly much this year, and I didn't see that tonight. But down the stretch, you look at what DeMar DeRozan was doing in the mid-range. He got confidence because he was able to drive. And same with Malik Monk. He was able to drive. I think after Donovan made that turnaround 3 on the inbound to cut it to 2 with like 30 seconds left or whatever, I think the Cavs actually defended that Malik Monk drive by pretty well. And Evan, he jumped on Malik Monk instead of just staying there and staying vertical. I never understood why 7-footers jump against guards that are 6'3", trying to get an alley-oop or a layup or try to draw a foul. But it worked, and Evan fouled him because he got him in the air, and then you come down the other end and didn't really get the best of looks. So that's how that one shook out. But like I said, we got a bunch of different things to talk about, but
Yeah.
I don't know about pulling apart to get a team individually, but there's quite a few comments in here that I would love to get to.
Yeah, we'll get to some of this stuff here in a second. I think it's another night, Spencer. We're talking about Donovan Mitchell struggling from the floor. I mean, he was 8 of 17, which is 47%, but still with just 1 of 6 from 3. Didn't seem to really have it, especially down the stretch, and they were leaning on him. But another night where it was like Donovan Mitchell iso ball to try to win the game, and it didn't go very well. Is this a concerning trend for you? Because I know last night we downplayed it. It's one night, first game of a West Coast trip, and they're trying to sort of get that one out. And you got the Clippers' best shot, obviously, But people continue to point to the numbers and say Donovan's been struggling now. Again, I believe he'll snap out of it before the playoffs. But yeah, like again, it's one of those things you try not to read into like one-off situations too much. Obviously, like you and I both don't try to overreact to that stuff. But when you've now had the stretch that Mitchell's had where he struggled and in late game situations he's trying to take over and the Cavs have gone sort of heavy ISO, which isn't the way they win, I can see where again that concern creeps in a little bit that they're now sort of developing bad habits in those moments and that Mitchell just isn't as effective as he needs to be in key spots like that.
Well, the play of the fourth quarter for me that was good that Donovan Mitchell had was where he came down. He was on the left wing, I want to say, and he had a good look at a three, and he recognized that Evan Mobley had the hot hand. We have not talked about how good of a stretch that was to close the third quarter for Evan Mobley. He looked like an absolute monster out in the open floor, knocking down 2 or 3 of those threes. So he had the hot hand, and Donovan looked for him at that point, that first stretch of the fourth quarter. And then when you saw as the game was going along, started to look for that floater. It started to go too. As I said, he knocked down, a big 3 there to cut it to 2 in the final minute. But I think there was a possession where Don took it down. I think they were still down by 2 maybe. And he tried the floater and it was just came up short. There were a number of his shots too that kind of rattled in and out. But like, you have to be critical of this stuff. If Donovan's going to do that, they got to go down. And Don, if he's going down the middle and he's drawing 2 or something like that, someone's out open on the perimeter. And I think Max Strus was the one who was wide open at the top of the perimeter there that could have had a nicer look, more open look. But I mean, you always want you want your best player to have the ball in his hands down the stretch for sure.
Yeah.
But there is a balance there that I think you can't be too forceful about it. Like he had a nice dribble move where he did the up and over cradle and float. Like those are nice shots. He makes the turnaround 3, but there's time and place, I think. And I'm never going to question Donovan Mitchell's ability to make those shots, but just pick your spots for sure. And if you're drawing a couple to you and you have a teammate that you can swing it to or whatever, then, maybe do that or get it into the hands of Evan Mobley a little bit more down the stretch, which he has done. And he has fostered the growth of Evan Mobley all season long. And tonight I just didn't see Evan touch it nearly enough down the stretch. And I think that was hurtful.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go there next because on a night where Mobley was brilliant, and Donovan, having his in the midst of the struggles that he's having right now, he got the support he needed from somebody like Mobley in the fourth quarter. Both Mitchell and Mobley had 10 points. Second half, Mobley had 22 points to Mitchell's 17 points. But he was playing really well, and I like you felt like, man, every time down the floor, the ball needs to be in Mobley's hands and stuff. Like they need to run the offense at some point through him. And the fact that it wasn't happening that way and it just became, again, the Donovan Mitchell ISO close to a game, I think was not ideal. Now, I'm assuming that's something they'll recognize. Like this is the hard thing to balance with this team, right? Is like you have a number of guys that can take over or have a great game or go out, ball out like we saw tonight. And it's kind of about like figuring out, as you alluded to, like who's going to foster or who's going to take over in those situations in any given night. Because some nights it might be Mobley, some nights it might be Donovan. I felt like tonight should have been a Mobley night, and just because of how well he was playing, and maybe things go a little bit differently. That was also something that I think struck me late in this game, was just that like where was Evan Mobley, being involved in the offense more, given how well he was playing.
Yeah, and I think too, like as I was mentioning earlier in kind of our opening dialogue, not having Darius Garland around to create for those guys and get Donovan off the ball and get Evan off the ball. I know that Evan's someone that's bringing it up now, and he's running in the dribble handoff actions. He's doing the pitch backs. He's doing all that stuff. But primarily, Darius is usually the guy that's creating that stuff and creating the secondary actions that can have the subsets with them, right? So not having that guy around always hurts. That's why I think Ty Jerome being in the game down the stretch was very good. I liked having him in there because he could have set the table, but they didn't really have it in his hands coming up the floor. And like you said, Donovan just kind of took matters into his own hands and tried to almost win it by himself. So, yeah, you don't want to fall back into that. And I don't think that he will. I think he's really, really self-aware. And I'm sure that when we hear his post-game comments or whatever, or read about him, that he's going to be reflective of this. And I don't think that Donovan's like a hog in any way. I think that right now there's a little bit of pressing because maybe they haven't been playing their best ball the last few weeks, right? And that even includes during the winning streak. And not to mention, like, you're probably thinking about, okay, this is going into the playoffs. But can we get to one point that I saw in the comments that I think is really interesting?
What's that?
Yeah, so we're not seeing as deep of a rotation as we're used to seeing right now. And in March, we said on our podcast, Courtside with Cavs on SI, subscribe today, that Kenny was going to uptick the starter minutes because he wanted to get them in that condition. Now, I know that you look at the stat sheet and you see 33 minutes, 30 minutes, and you compare it to someone like Tibbs, for example, or, you know, the old JB Bickerstaff days, and that's nothing. But these guys have been running around, you know, 30 to 32 minutes all year, not really being pushed to that 35, 36 minute, you know, threshold. Kenny's trying to get that out of them. I think that he would do that if it means even not winning games, because he's still kind of trying to up that endurance, if you will. And I think that that's also kind of played into why you haven't seen as much of, you know, a Javonte Green, or why Craig Porter only played 8 minutes tonight, which I thought was really interesting because they probably could have used his playmaking ability and obviously a different wrinkle in there. You know, that's not something that we're used to seeing this season. We're used to seeing a lot of minutes in the 20s and stuff like that. Now, I know that's because they'd been blowing out opponents and stuff in the first half of the season and all that stuff, but I think that that's also an adjustment for them physically. And I know that everyone's tired at this point of the season, but that's not something they've been used to all year. So that's another thing that I think is interesting to hit on.
Yeah, and that could also play into, you know, the tired factor a little bit more, like some of these guys having an uptick in minutes. And, you know, I also just think, Spence, like we talked about it last night, like it is a make or miss league at the end of the day. And when some of the role players aren't making their shots, you mentioned Sam Merrill's struggles. Like not everything is as perfect. Like there's some chaos out there. There's some tense moments out there, and they got to sort of navigate those, because those things are going to come your way in the postseason as well. I did see something else I sort of saw in the comments that I thought was interesting. Jake brings up Ty Jerome has to stop chucking threes. I wonder if fans are mad at Ty Jerome, because since he was talking against the Magic on Sunday, things have not really gone as well for the Cavaliers. I mean, listen, I love Ty Jerome, and I love the attitude he brings to the game. And I thought the exchange with Paolo Banchero was hilarious, just like subjectively. But yeah, like it is kind of interesting that like that sort of represented maybe a moment for people where Ty Jerome and the Cavs got a little too ahead of themselves, and then they've now got caught slipping a little bit where they lose 3 in a row. I'm not going to attribute to that specifically, but that is kind of an interesting sort of like correlation there. Let's see. Let's find some other stuff that people are sort of bringing up here in the comments. I thought this was a good one from Taz as well. Sleek Freaks, Struce is loose, and Jay Afro were all the hot hands the last 3 games, and all their touches disappeared in the fourth quarter. Yeah,
someone used my nickname. I'll take it.
Yeah, I like
Sleek
that.
Freak, Sleek Freak.
I do think I do think that is just, again, a testament to what we talked about, Spence, where it's like there's been a lot more ISO ball in the fourth quarter, especially from this team, and that's uncharacteristic for them. I
have another thing. Sorry.
No, you're okay. I was going to throw this one up too, because I was going to say from LaSmooch, he says, I think Kenny is going to use Mobley as a stretch 4 more with the 3 ball. And on a night like this where I wanted to see more Mobley involved in the offense late, I mean, Spence, when Kenny Atkinson took this job, he talked so emphatically about how important Evan Mobley was going to be to their success and how where they're able to go. Like we've gotten Evan Mobley to this point. Kenny deserves a lot of credit for getting Evan Mobley to this point. Lean on him, right? Like lean on him in those moments, especially on a night like tonight where he was playing so well. Like the whole point of this is that it doesn't just become about Donovan. And I get like some of that falls on Donovan too, to sort of be the distributor rather than the guy who's taking over. But at the same time, like, like it needs to be a priority to get him in certain nights or certain games to be the focal point of the offense. And that's what this is supposed to be. Like it's supposed to be about Evan becoming that guy as well for this team. So I think that's another interesting comment as well.
I don't think that Kenny's freezing him out by any means. Like he
And
led
that,
the
yeah, I'm
team
not trying
in
to,
field goal attempts.
yeah,
tonight.
no. I'm not trying to imply
So,
that he's freezing him
yeah.
out. That wasn't more so my point. It was just like, like get like I'm trying to sort of convey Kenny knows how important Mobley is to this team.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't think again, I think they'll all learn from this as a whole, but I just was trying to get to the point of like, yeah, like making sure the ball is going in Evan Mobley's direction that time of the game is I think a recipe for winning, because they've all talked about how important he is to this team's success.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Can we get to the elephant in the room though?
What's that?
We're all talking about kind of their execution in the fourth quarter and ISO ball and stuff like that. They're not in that position if they don't give up 43 to the Kings in the third quarter. And there's something about third quarter defense that has been their Achilles heel all year long, and third quarters in general, that I don't think that we're focusing on enough, that could translate into the playoffs if they're not careful. Got to be ready coming out of the locker room. Lead, down, you gotta be ready coming out of the locker room. And I think that is something where I will take that as that's a flaw of theirs. I think the third quarter has been really killer for them. They played an awful third quarter and had to be rescued by Evan Mobley at the end of that quarter in order to be even within 2 points. So I think that's another part of this that has to be discussed, and I'm sure that someone will bring it up. If no one brings it up, then when they come back home, then I'm going to ask Kenny that, because I think that the third quarter in general, you can't just have 3 out of 4 good quarters. You've got to be able to execute throughout all of them. And there's something about the focus coming out of the locker room that's just not sitting right with me right now. And Evan was really a one-man wrecking crew in that second half, and not getting a whole lot else out of everybody else. But yeah, I think that Evan was brilliant tonight. Like for positives, like I still think that Max Strus is playing an excellent brand of basketball, has been all month long. He creates a ton of havoc off ball. I think he's doing a lot of good things at being a connector and really making a lot of noise just by weaving around, catching, and then throwing it out to the perimeter, or, lay up at the rim, or setting someone up in the pocket. I think he's been excellent for them this entire month, so that definitely deserves credit. I think Isaac Okoro has been really good in his minutes, and he's going to start pushing for rotation minutes if Sam's not careful, because Ice is coming out and denying ball and then off ball, just blowing up screens and doing some really good things. Dean Wade deserves a ton of credit tonight. He put up 8 shots, took 6 threes, and hurt us out on that. Yeah, and I mean, he hit 4. I think he missed his last couple, but at least he's out there doing that and also grabbing boards. It's not easy for Dean, probably, by the way, because DeAndre Hunter sort of took his spot, and it's not easy to do that and then come back from injury and try to get back into a rhythm, because I know a couple people asking me that stuff. So, like, Wade and Okoro are looking like themselves. So if you want a positive, then there's a positive for you there, Cavs Nation.
Yeah, I like that. Is there any panic, or at what point, Spence, should there be panic about potentially losing the number 1 seed in the East? Because I don't think right now it's still 6 games. That's a pretty comfortable lead with how many games are left at this point now? The Cavs are 57-13. So quick math here. There's 12 games left or so. They should be okay. But I understand where everybody knows Boston's really good, and if they were to go on some crazy streak here at the end, it might put the pressure on the Cavs. So I'm not sitting here worried, but obviously I know that starts to creep into people's minds when you talk about the playoff picture, and if there were some massive collapse here to give up that lead.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I hate the word panic, can you be concerned about this particular loss and the way it happened and how there's been a similar trend the last couple of games in that way, or 3 games, whatever it is? Yeah. I don't know about panic. If you want to take more stock into these 3 games and into, if you really want to say post All-Star break, then the amount of games pre All-Star break that they were just a complete juggernaut, be my guest. I don't do that. I don't try to take waving, sweeping conclusions and generalizations based off a smaller sample size. But at the same time, yeah, obviously there's a little bit of like, oh, like maybe there is something going on there. And I'm interested to see how they respond the last 3 games of this road trip on the West Coast. I also told everybody that this is a very tough time of year in March. That goes for every team. There's not a whole lot of teams that are executing very well right now, but that's not an excuse still. Kenny referred to it as a slog pregame today. So we're going to use that word. This stretch of the season is a slog. So, yeah, you got to buck up. You got to figure it out. And I have no doubt that they'll respond. This is their first 3-game losing streak of the season. This is the first time they've really had adversity probably since January. So, I don't know. I just don't. I don't live in that world. If you live in that world and you have that opinion, that's your opinion. And it's your right. I just don't think. I don't see it, man. I think that they know who they are. They know what their identity is. And they're way too talented to do what they have been doing.
And naturally, as soon as you mention the Celtics, somebody jumps in with a Celtics comment. He's calling the Cavs frauds and saying the Celtics will win in 6. So that'll get you fired up for what remains in the season. Marcus Rungston making a bold promise that they're going to win the rest of the season, and that he'll be here after every game to remind us. So we'll be happy to hear that from you if that comes to fruition. And Robbie Miller alludes to what you say, not panicked, but definitely concerned for sure. The Cavs need to play better going into the playoffs. I do think that's the most important thing, because I talk so much of habits, right, during the regular season. And at this time of year, you want those habits to be at their best. You don't want the bad habits to be sort of kicking in. And there has been some of that for Cleveland. I think the point you make, Spence, on the third quarters, I hadn't even thought of that tonight, but it's a really good one. I obviously knew that the Kings had a really good third quarter tonight. It didn't really click at the time with me that, like, oh yeah, that's been a problem all year as well. And I do think that is something, like, you want to talk about trends for this team that are in the wrong direction. Some of this stuff I think is just like, yeah, it's been a 3-game stretch of some certain things being bad. That is a year-long thing that has been a problem. And so I think you're right. Like, they got to get that one especially figured out going into the playoffs, because you don't want to get blitzed by a team like Boston coming out of the third quarter and then the game's over. So that is one that I am probably the most concerned about. But we can talk about, I think that's a good topic to bring up on the pod tomorrow, like the thing that we're most concerned about with this Cavs team right now. We will be dropping a new episode of the pod, Courtside with the Cavs on SI, tomorrow right here on the Cleveland Cavaliers and SI YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe so you can see when that comes out live. It'll probably be sometime in the afternoon. But we encourage you, as always, to like this channel, follow along with the podcast, follow along with any of our content over here on the YouTube channel, including post-game comments from Kenny Atkinson, players, etc. Obviously not tonight, because neither Spencer on the West Coast, as you can tell. But yeah, there'll be plenty of opportunities for more of that here down the stretch of the season. And of course, read any of our written content over at si.com/NBA/Cavaliers, as we keep you up to date on everything with your favorite basketball team here the rest of the way. Spence, any final thoughts before I get us out of here?
Yeah, no, with Don, I did not recognize what I saw from him tonight as far as just trying to be a playmaker. Like, there were a couple of passes that he made that he knows he can't make. And I think that everyone that's watching knows that you can't make passes that you're staring down your target, or you're just throwing down a ball just waiting to be pick six the other way. Kings had a ton of breakaways tonight. I think that was also a big part of why the defense looked as bad as it did in the second half, because a lot of those are transition looks and they're going the other way with, feeds that just can't be made. They had to be more crisp. They had a tough time making entry passes. There was some really fundamental stuff that they did not do well tonight, which, again, is not characteristic of them. So in that department, no worry. I have no worry offensively about this team. Everything stems on the defensive end, that third quarter, and making sure that they guard their yard, as I've been saying all year long.
That's going to do it for Spencer Davies. I'm Spencer German. Like I said, keep an eye out for a new episode of the podcast tomorrow, right here with the Cleveland Cavaliers and YouTube channel. But in the meantime, get some sleep. It's been a long two nights here, and we'll see if the Cavaliers can bounce back on Friday against the Phoenix Suns. Take it easy, Cleveland. Keep on following with all things Cleveland Cavaliers with the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.